Sunday morning Zen program. And it's great to have everybody here with us this morning. If you enjoy programs like Sunday morning Zen, we'd appreciate it if you head over to zlmc.org/donate and help support programs like this. They're offered free of charge, but of course there is a cost here at the center for putting them on. And if they're important to you and make a difference in your life, we'd appreciate a donation. This morning we have a very special treat. One of the priests here at ZLMC, the Reverend Lori Shinkõ Snyder, is going to deliver a talk titled "The Suffering We Create." And Reverend Shinkõ has been facilitating our nonviolent communication circle here at ZLMC for the past 5 years. It's a wonderful support group. Lives locally with her husband, teenage children, and pets. And as if all that wasn't enough, she's also enrolled in the master's program for the chaplaincy at Loyola. So busy life there. And we always look forward to hearing her speak. So take it away, Lori. Great to have you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I guess I'm talking about a topic that's all very close to us, suffering. I just finished my class with Loyola this semester, and it was called the Theologies of Suffering. Loyola said at one point, "We don't need you to take this class. You're a Buddhist, you know all about suffering." But I disagreed because I don't know how Christians suffer. So each week I would read a lot of literature on suffering, Christianity. And my husband would ask me, "Are you still reading about suffering? Haven't you had enough?" I guess not. Some people want to know why I study chaplaincy at Loyola. And I'm doing it to learn more about the Christians and how they address faith and suffering. The Christians look to Jesus as the Savior, and the study of this is soteriology. People seek his name in the image of on the cross when they suffer. But what is he saving us from if he's also suffering? I've concluded he's saving them from despair, the awful rips of gut-wrenching sorrow. While I still don't understand a lot of Christianity, I've learned a lot from them and have grown to admire the work of Jesus. Jesus exhibited radical love, acceptance, and social action. He was loved by thousands, but loathed by just enough to land him on the cross. That's very important for us involved in social action Buddhism to remember. When Christians who are suffering connect through empathy with Jesus on the cross, it leads to the theodicy of, "Why me, God?" Jesus asked God, "Why have you forsaken me?" It's a puzzling place of quandary that many find themselves in, especially in instances of unexpected suffering as a faithful follower. Likewise, we Buddhists sometimes look at these same lens moments and think about the retribution of karma. This punishment thinking will only create more suffering. The second arrow into our pain, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it. Sometimes in my classes, they put me on the spot and ask me about Buddhism. Or one day, specifically, they said, "What does hope mean to a Buddhist?" I paused and I said, "I wake up each day, the sun rises, and all things have the ability to mutate and change, as impermanence is the only thing we can count on." I think I must have really puzzled those Catholics. I really like that George Harrison song, "All Things Must Pass Away." I find great comfort in considering impermanence. It means that when you're in a situation that's tough, you have the chance to hold on or run away. You can't run from impermanence. That gives me hope, especially when I'm considering my own suffering and the suffering of others. This too shall pass. Buddhists know suffering is a part of life. We're born, we live, we die. You cannot separate life from death. They are one and bound to each other. We cannot sustain life without death. Everything is a choice between life and death. Some people are terribly afraid of death, and they live in this misery of darkness, especially if they're living with chronic pain. The truth is, our life is so very precious, and we cannot know when our time is over. I love the Zen Buddhist sign that reminds us of life and death. And I have an enso of it here. I don't know if this translates very well, but I'll read it to you. Reminder, life and death are of grave importance, impermanent and swift. Wake up, all of you. Do not waste your life. Buddha said, all I teach is suffering and the end to suffering. It sounds so simple. It is. We make it very complicated. Humans are genius at overcomplicating corrections. Look at mass incarceration prison facilities. Buddha founded for us the Four Noble Truths. There's suffering in life. Desire and delusion are the cause. We know the solution, Zazen and the Eightfold Path. We fall into suffering as this precious human life is riddled with moments that are a real drag. Stuff happens to us and we react. I just finished reading Dainin Katagiri's book, Returning to Silence. Katagiri Roshi says, the cause of suffering is that we have an object, meaning conditions, friends, parents, teachers, Zen Buddhism, Christianity, ethics, science, it goes on. Suffering comes from our attachment to these conditions. That's pretty much everything in life. He goes on to say, Buddha taught us that we cannot ignore these conditions as they support our life. So as best we can, we should create better conditions from moment to moment. That means taking better care of our own suffering and the suffering we create. I'm going to give a few examples of some suffering I have witnessed and around me, particularly revolving around the three poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. These three acts of suffering are the absence of love for ourselves and for others. Most of us can identify with each of these. When you have the lethal combination of all three, there's a recipe for war. And we can see that in many places of our world right now. Many places are suffering. The first poison, greed. It's the lack of generosity, the fear of loss or financial security and boundaries. How does this appear in your body? Gluttony, rigidness, tightness, control issues. Whenever I hold back, I feel tight. I feel this tightness right here. And when I share, I feel open. And I notice this with the homeless. Sometimes I'm not up for feeding a drug habit when somebody asks me for money. I kind of just roll with my intuition. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if that next hit of heroin's going to help. I don't know. I really struggle with that. Ram Dass says, if you think your happiness in this society comes from turning your eyes away from people that are suffering, believe me, your happiness is riddled with fear. So when I do give, I've pushed myself to practice generosity with faith. It's kind of fun. It means reaching into your pocket and handing over whatever cash comes out for the homeless. It's a game of grabbing what they need. You're a conduit. I trust that the hand knows how much they need more than I know. It takes participation of me carrying variable amounts of cash in a separate pocket. And the more I practice this, the hand brought out larger bills without me flinching. Sometimes lately, it's a 20. I give it with the gratitude that I can share. And I feel open and really fluid. And I notice that energy. The second poison I'm going to talk about is anger. There's a lot more juicy stuff for this one. Anger is a lack of patience, empathy, and curiosity. When it arises, it signals a great unmet need. It can show up in many places of your body: headaches, shoulders, stiffness, stomach, a lot of different pain, hot. Sometimes I feel like steam's coming out of my ears. One misperception that I've encountered in the past year is that people don't believe Buddhists, especially priests, should get angry. Should's a bad word here. So they think that Buddhists are always calm. It's a terrible misunderstanding. Especially, because we have needs too. So getting mad signifies that we have needs that are unmet. And when they're not met, we get triggered. There are many stories of Zen masters roaring at monks. It's a great irony in our world seeking peaceful means of Buddhism. But sometimes the ego needs a good shouting at. Maybe that's different than anger. The aim is to deal with your anger, recognizing it and caring for the flames so they do not consume you and you do not feed them. Unfortunately, not many of us are good firefighters. So we tend to share this one with everyone who is around us. In some sort of misaligned way, we want others to know we're in pain. And some even feel better when they see others hurting alongside them. This creates sadness and more suffering. Hurt people hurt people. This is catastrophic, as that energy cascades out infinitely. Just like when you sit in meditation pose, how that peacefulness ripples out. When you get angry, that's like a domino ripple out of anger. It's really good to remember that, but that's really hard in those moments. So I'll give you an example of something that happened to me this past year. I was at work. I was having a telephone conversation with someone who is pretty tough to work with. And this person was questioning my library protocols. It really grabbed my ego and shook it. My ego stepped in and said, "Look, bub, I got a lot of initials past my last name and title. I know what I'm talking about, you nincompoop." This was a really great teaching moment. The judgment of nincompoop, it rose up and it was ready to slay. It was a signal that a deep need that was important to me was not being met. And those needs were respect and trust. I was in a lot of built up pain from this work relationship. Maya Angelou said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." If we're using nonviolent communication, we can translate that to how you felt, not how they made you feel. So when this situation happened at work, and I got this trigger, I got so pissed off in that moment, I bit the hook and swallowed it. I realized I was angry, and I needed to extract myself from that conversation to maintain civility. I said goodbye, maybe a little terse. It was like, goodbye. But I knew it was over in a way. I got up from my desk and I took a walk. I was so steamed up. I totally lost my head. I had to take my phone and Google Buddhist tools for dealing with anger. I just was like, God, I don't know what's going on right now. I had to look it up. So I found Pema Chodron in this article on Lion's Roar. Pema calls this type of a moment a squeeze, when you're stuck in a difficult situation. The hook that I bit is called Chenpa. And we heal ourselves with patience for ourselves and for others. And we apply empathy for ourselves and for others. That really helped me calm down. Thich Nhat Hanh, in his book on anger, this is a good book. He recommends Buddha's instructions for mindful breathing, mindful walking, and embracing our anger to look deeply into our perceptions of others, as they are also suffering. And he says, anger is a mental, psychological phenomena. yet it is closely linked to a biological and biochemical elements. Anger makes you tense your muscles, but when you know how to smile, you begin to relax and your anger will decrease. Smiling allows the energy of mindfulness to be born in you, helping you embrace your anger. At the end of that tough day, I did a practice that many of us do. I quit. In your head, you quit whatever it is that's bothering you. So you just go, I quit, kind of like that. It's a total letting go. It's a tremendous act of freedom. You leave all the worrying behind. You go home, you leave it. You don't have to think about what happened that day, who said what to you, what pain you're in. You can just go back. It's gone. And then you start again the next day with beginner's mind. If you're quitting every day, that's a problem. Or maybe it isn't. And that segues into the third poison, ignorance. Ignorance is a lack of curiosity. It's ignoring the quest for truth. It's apathy. It's the belief that you are right. Are you sure? Are you really, really sure? When you take Jukai or take vows, your teacher will ask you if you will keep the precepts. And they say, are you really, really sure? They ask because they know that we will not be able to keep the precepts. Are you really, really sure? It's impossible. But we take the vows and try our best. We answer yes in that moment, and it's a form of ceremonial ignorance. Thich Nhat Hanh says, the next time you think you know a situation, write on a piece of paper and hang it in your room. Are you sure you were right? We create a lot of suffering when we think we're absolutely right and that we know something to be sure due to our perceptions and misunderstandings. I'm reading Suzuki Roshi's book right now, Crooked Cucumber. And he says, to stick to something rigidly is laziness. We might even share those beliefs with others and hook them into our misery. Just look at the news media. People who believe news that are different from your views. This can show up as grasping and delusions. It's best to stick to don't know mind. Zen Master Swangsang, he always talks about don't know mind. Or Suzuki Roshi says, not always so. And sometimes when we get stuck, it's because we have some judgments, despite our Buddhist attempts not to. We have labels, and maybe they're hidden, and we're not even really aware that we have them, but they're there. And we get really stuck in these labels. And they signify an unmet need in our existence. And they show up as a strong feeling associated with the label. The needs and the judgments are tied together as one package. Can we just drop it all and see people and things as it is, as they are? Sometimes it's hard. Another example of ignorance is worry, anxiety, despair, fear. I'm calling them ignorance because I feel like they're a lack of faith. Anxiety is worry about the future. And if you're having any of these, you're not in the present moment. I'm an old friend with anxiety and worry. My meditation practice has really helped me calm these down. If you're stuck in those, your health is really worried. Your health is disturbed. You have bad sleep, digestion, headaches, tense muscles. Recently, I've had my share of worries and anxiety. My family has a lot of health issues, and I'm one of the few taking care to support them. My father's been in the hospital with multiple amputations since November. My daughter started having seizures. My job added more work to my workload. I have another job knocking at my door. And all this was while I was finishing my final paper for my graduate class. I was stressed and slightly overwhelmed. And when people asked how I was doing, I would tell them exactly what was going on because I really needed to talk. And some people couldn't handle my story. Mostly people said, "That's a lot." And I would say, "Yep." It didn't always feel relieving for me to tell my story to people. And I think this was a signal that I wasn't being heard. It was too much for most people to hear. Finally, I sat down with a Buddhist chaplain. It's a friend of mine at work. And he was the only person to say, "Lori, you're in pain." I felt instantly relieved of a burden that I was carrying. Once it was recognized, I felt free. His empathy helped me to come home. I was able to start taking care of myself then. And once I started to feel at peace, I could address some of the decisions about where my life was going because I felt deeply unmoored. I realized I was running from one burning building to another and to what seemed like a fancy cart, like in the Lotus Sutra. Dogen says, the cart's also burning. And we can see this in the Buddha's fire sermon, where he tells us the whole world is on fire. The sermon's about aversion and attachments and letting go by recognizing them. There really is no escape, running from one thing to the next. We can leave relationships, jobs, religious organizations, people we do not care for, but we cannot leave ourselves. Our mirror is there every day. When we run away from something, we are sure to run right into it in the next place or relationship. However, when we learn from our situation and then choose to walk towards something, that leads to growth. Sometimes it's really painful to grow. But if you look at the butterfly, it's worth it. When you take care of yourself, you're taking care of others. Pain is not taken care of, is shared with others. So let me say that again. Pain that is not taken care of is shared with others. Practice do not harm. We're all in trauma right now and navigating as best as we can. Life doesn't stop with the pandemic. And when you're in emotional trauma, you tend to spill it if not handled. So don't spill your poison. If you've witnessed something, maybe it was traumatic, or someone said something to you that really stayed with you. Sometimes these are played repeatedly in our head like a video on a loop. You have to know how to take care of this type of trauma and treat it very carefully, like a lethal vial of a chemical. If we ruminate too much on it, it's drinking the poison again and again. And you need to know a professional to help you detoxify the suffering so you can take care of yourself. If you happen to reach out to other people, you might be asking or telling your story to the wrong person. And you're spilling your poison onto them for them to carry for you. I had someone spill their trauma on me while I was in trauma, and it was very difficult. I could only wish him well. It's good to ask first if someone is willing to receive your story. Sometimes we fall into empathic distress as we over-identify with others' pain as our own. We're all deeply connected. So take care of yourself. Meditate. Do deep breathing to calm the limbic system. I attended Roshi Joan Halifax's workshop on being with the dying recently. And she instructs us that we're in a really tough situation to get grounded in your seat. Really feel your gravity of your body, your feet on the floor, and within your surroundings. And breathe into a strong back and a soft, open-hearted front. And in times, while I've still been in a sort of trauma going on with the things that are going on, I've tried this practice and it really helps. Trauma that's not taken care of can turn into intergenerational trauma. It passes on from generation to generation. This is quite sad. And it's done by nature or nurture. Genetically, we carry a DNA cell memory of something traumatic that's happened to us. And that's passed on through generations. Research has shown second and third generations of trauma victims experience higher levels of anxiety than the initial person that had the trauma. They are higher conditioned to respond to the triggers. And this gives me great concern for all of us in this pandemic, because we're all in trauma. And we need to collectively take care of our trauma as we're passing some very serious information on to the future. Let us make sure they know how to meditate and to take care of this fear. I'm concerned how this could create more divisive fears of others rather than collective safety. It's already happening. Maybe you see it when you take a walk. I think maybe it's easing up right now with people unmasking, but people still are a little bit afraid of each other and they dodge each other like they're the poison. And I'm concerned. There's so many people who are suffering. And then we can add on the suffering of the poor, people who have lost their work, the homeless, oppressed, systemic abuse. Many of these people don't have a voice, and they receive retribution for vocalization. When the system tries to convince you that kids and men with guns shooting on capitals are okay, but people vocalizing in the streets is not, this is a sign of systemic oppression in action. People who are abused lose all the options for equality. They're wrong no matter what they do. And the abuse of power is fearful of losing its position. They know they're wrong, but they'll do anything to keep it that way and fear what will happen if justice is actually served. Therefore, they cheat, lie, and steal to keep the abuse of power. The people who benefit from those who are in poverty, who are overworked and miserable, have no skin in creating a change that would change their comforted way of living. I read a really great book in my class this past semester, and it was by Father John Sobrino, a leading scholar in liberation theology. And he urges us to move towards solidarity, a true utopia. It sounds kind of, well, utopian, fantastic. The issue is that there seems to be no incentive for the rich to come to the aid of the poor, as this is the abusive system they're benefiting from. And Father Sobrino says we must have reparations where there's equality, so that there's incentive for the rich to come help the poor, and then there's equality. And I've thought a lot about this a lot. And in my own situation, in an abusive environment. But there will be no retribution or reformation without reconciliation of forgiveness. White people must begin to heal this imbalance with recognizing the pain they have caused others, even if it is unaware, beneficial participation. We must speak up and beg forgiveness, and then work to open our hearts and minds for a new world where we can take care of one another and work together so that all have equal opportunity and justice. Suffering is a lack of generosity for ourselves and others. Forgiveness is an act of generosity. Generosity is one of the 6 paramitas. So I have a few more quotes. The moment you understand the importance of loving yourself, you will stop hurting others. That's Thich Nhat Hanh. Another one by Thich Nhat Hanh. If you know how to suffer, you suffer much less. And I have a little poem by Sensei that she shared recently. It's by Zen Master Shinkõ. Don't ask for perfect health. That's just greedy. Make medicine from the suffering and sickness. Don't hope to be without problems. That's just laziness. Accept life's difficulties. Don't expect your path to be free from obstacles. Without them, the fire of your enlightenment will go out. Find liberation within the disturbances themselves. That kind of concludes my talk, but I'm just going to briefly go over the tools that I used when I was miserably suffering in this past year and share them with you. Because, oh man, did I suffer. There were some really difficult moments. And of course we know sitting zazen, right? Meditating. But there were some times when I was in so much pain that I couldn't meditate. So I would still sit on the cushion daily, every day, but sometimes I just watched the birds or the trees or the wind or people walking dogs. And if I was really suffering, I did kinhin, walking meditation. And that really helped, just walking. And I don't know how this happened, but sometimes I was really suffering and I would sit down and I was able to do shikantaza, which is, I don't know, that was like a miracle how that happened. Because when you're suffering, it's hard to meditate. But I was able to do shikantaza and just be the mountain. And then once you're the mountain, let go of the mountain. Can't think about the mountain anymore. Dogen, he wrote about mountains walking. And sometimes I was thinking about this. I think he was talking about everybody sitting in zazen and then doing kinhin. Because those are mountains walking. I did Roshi's, one other thing I did was Roshi, Halifax's, ground yourself with the strong back, soft front, and just breathe and notice your breathing. Feel what does it feel like for the air to pass through your nostrils? Is it velvety? Is it harsh? Anything that brings you into that present moment was really helpful to me. If I was worrying, if I found myself in anxiety or worrying, I immediately cut it and diverted to chanting. And I used 4 or 5 different chants that I would go to. When we chant the Heart Sutra, we learn the ultimate mantra, the one that relieves all pain, right? We always chant this, but I was like, oh, I'm going to test this out. Gate gate, paragate, parasam gate, bodhisvaha. It works. Try it. Sometimes, some people know me that I'm very fond of one of the chants that we do, the Enmei Juku Kanangyo. So I taught myself that chant, and sometimes I'll chant that. Sometimes just simply Om Mani Padme Hum. That was go-to. And then some of you will recognize this one from a different tradition that we practice in. I and all sentient beings until we achieve enlightenment go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Going for refuge is important. Reverend Diane Miyagetsu, she always tells me, go for refuge. I really appreciate that. And also, she said, chanting is mind protection. It's true. It really does help because it keeps you from going into those spinning loops. If you can, when you're in those suffering moments, try to see things as it is. That's what Suzuki Roshi says. Not always easy, though. Keep don't know mind. Mu. If you're trapped in anger, apply patience and empathy. Have a flower's mind. Have good intention. Work earnestly every day towards a positive goal. Drink water, breathe air, lean into the wind, smile to the sun. Open fully when you feel comfortable. Shine, but do not brag. Stay as long as you can and drop your petals slowly. are all together at once, like an orchid. Then one day you can look out and you can see Mahakashapa smile. So thank you for joining me today. If you want to open it up, if there's comments, I'm not sure I can answer questions on the spot, but we'll try.
Shinkõ. Oh my gosh, that was so full of love, so full of sharing what we all have been through. Exactly. I want to share with you, I have no question. I just want to share with you, like everybody, I really had a huge period of suffering this year. And I realized that I at one point I realized I started thinking about the of the guy who had a drunk friend and who tried to help him, and the guy just fell asleep. So he sewed a pearl into his clothing, and the guy was out of his, he was stoned, he was out. So he sewed it in, and then he left. And many years later, he ran into this friend. Like, maybe you all know it, but I'm going to finish the story anyway. He ran into this friend. He says, "How are you doing?" And he says, "I've been doing terribly." He said, "Well, why?" He said, I sewed I gave the pearl." He said, "What?" And I realized at some point that I had the pearl. I just wasn't looking. I wasn't looking in my clothing. I wasn't looking in my body. I wasn't looking for it. But when I did, I apologized to everybody. I apologized to my wife. I apologized to my friends. I apologized to myself. And that was greatly relieving. So I have great empathy for what you talked about, and I have great admiration for all you said today and how you explained it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, we all have the pearl sewn in right here.
Shinkõ, so skillful what you're sharing, and what I so deeply appreciate is how uncomplicated it can be to walk this path, and how many resources and teachings Buddha gave to help all of us. So I really resonated with your saying, breathe, chant, walk, sit, look, listen. It's, so many teachers say how simple it is. And I think as human beings, we say, how could it be that simple? It feels really hard to progress, along the path. But, it's all enlightened action, isn't it? Whatever we do, that brings us back to the moment. And I so appreciate your sharing those practical, very beautiful and meaningful teachings. They work. Otherwise, why would they be around for over 2,500 years? Something works, right? So thank you. Deep bows to you, sister.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you so much, Shinkõ, for such a beautiful talk today about suffering. We were in a workshop yesterday, with Anne Ehringhaus, and what she was saying is it's so important to share your feelings, actually. And that's not so easy to do. I mean, we have to also work on our feelings so we're not projecting it out, right? We're owning them. That's really important. And she said it's kind of a new frontier that's so important right now. And when we share our feelings, we are inviting the other to evolve. So isn't that a beautiful way to look at it? So I really thank you for the practices, for your practice. And yes, we all can use it.
Thank you, Sensei.
Lori, I had a practical question, if you will. So a little while back, I was talking to a group of people through Zoom, and we were discussing the future of a project, and everybody was anxious. And I said, I think we should really just all settle into not knowing about this for a while longer and wait. And one of the people said, oh, that is so wussy. And I knew it was a bait, and I left it go. I let it go. I did not take the bait. I didn't make any comment. However, perhaps there was a comment that I could make. Would you know an answer that would be skillful to that?
That is tricky. Because that's a judgment that they were saying. So they had a need behind that judgment. And you could feel into whatever that need was. So what was their need? Because they were not used to, it sounds like they were not used to something that would not be a quick answer. And they had maybe a need for time efficiency. So you might respond back to them with saying, you could speak their own language and you could say, well, let's really feel into wussiness. And that might just give some humor to it, But because at work, people don't always want to talk about feelings. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it could be hard, you could just kind of, sometimes you have to play with it a little bit. But if you really wanted to make connection, you could feel into it.
Yes, probably I could. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's nice to see you all.
Thanks so much for your wonderful talk.
Have a beautiful day.